I'm Sal Mercogliano, and I'm watching the Break It Down show.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, so I've got a little bit of technical difficulties, everybody, but I think we're all right. We'll see how it goes. For right now, everything's good. So let's just keep trucking. Shipping is always important, man. Just background. I used to be a combat spy. I did a lot of stuff in combat zones, places like Iraq and Afghanistan. So I love when I get to talk to folks from a totally different part of our world. In this case, we're sort of connected because, you know, you guys got to do your job with the shipping thing. The Navy's got to do their job with the Navy thing. And these things all sort of work together in the overall security blanket. But it's such a different planet that you guys live on. I'm fascinated by this. I know a lot of people in your world who kind of work on these problems, and it is frustrating to get anybody to believe you guys when you're like, we have to work on this capacity. And now look at you guys. You're all front of the news right now. Right now. How long do you think it'll last before the shipping folks kind of get pushed back to all the other things that happen in the world? Thanks for coming on the show, Sal. This is great.
I think like everything else, we have a very short attention span, and right now, shipping has been having its moment for a few years now. I would argue for about 5 years since Ever Given went sideways in the Suez, and then we had the supply chain crisis come up. We saw how important shipping was in Russia, Ukraine. We saw the Panama Canal go through low water. We had the Dolly hit the bridge in Baltimore. Now it's again forefront. We had the Houthis in the Red Sea for 2 years, and now we have this. And so it's a big challenge. I mean, a lot of us don't like to admit it, but the world is very connected, and we're very interwoven together in regards to trade and commerce. And when something happens half a planet away, it actually does affect us in some ways. And unfortunately, as much as we like to be independent and be on our own, it definitely has an impact.
Yeah, you said a lot there. Before we even got mad at the folks in Yemen, I would ask because I know that there's this rolling conflict, right? Been going on for quite a while, and I would ask my guests who were sort of experts in the security world, how come we're not mad about Yemen? And then shipping got addressed, and all of a sudden everybody comes very comfortable with launching rockets at a country, and it's so weird to not care. Can we put the Yemen on the map to we have to kill the bad guys there, and so we struggle with kind of managing this thing. It seems to me from my non-shipping balcony over here, in that we won't care. We don't absolutely don't care anything about Myanmar, Burma, and any of the conflict there. We don't care at all. But if that conflict bled into the shipping waters, boy oh boy, we start paying attention.
Oh yeah, I mean it's exactly right. I mean it is absolutely relative to what the concerns are. If the U.S. and Israel were waging this conflict against Afghanistan, I mean we wouldn't be seeing the issue that we're seeing right now. But because Iran straddles the Persian Gulf and more importantly the Strait of Hormuz, they have that
Mm-hmm.
ability to exercise control, and that's the issue that we have right now. 25% of global trade goes through. I use an analogy and I use it a lot that if you look at a map of world shipping and everything, it's like the circulatory system of global trade. And what happens is right now we've got kind of a clamp on the femoral artery of 25% of our trade. And the longer
Right.
that stays, the more damage it does, the more difficult it does. It's going to be a big issue. So sooner or later, we've got to get that trade opened back up, because what we're seeing right now is increase at the pumps right now, 60 cents a gallon rise. Because if you cut off oil heading to East Asia, then that oil is going to come from somewhere else, and that causes a rush on demand in the United States.
How fast can we move on these problems? I had a buddy of mine who focuses on engineering and logistics. We can move things at great speed, but that doesn't mean it moves as fast as we want. So, how long do these changes take to feel either the good side or the bad side? How is it a week, 10 days? How long is it?
Well, a lot of it is shock right off the bat. I would argue that there's no oil shortage. I mean, there's we're talking about
Right.
20 million barrels a day coming out of the Persian Gulf, but there's almost 100 million barrels afloat off the coast of Singapore at any one time. Plus, there's strategic reserves. There's oil coming from other places. It's really perception, and this is one of the things we see all the time. If you're on the East Coast of the United States and hurricane comes into Houston, they shut down the Colonial Pipeline. People panic, and but they don't need to, because there's plenty of gasoline, there's tanks, we can shut down a pipeline for days without a major problem. But it's all in the matter of perception. The problem you have with Hormuz is this: is that it's not just one commodity, it's multiple commodities. It's oil, it's
Mm,
gasoline, it's aviation fuel, it's bunker fuel, it's fertilizer, it's helium. It's all these commodities that come out of there. And some of it can be fungible in other sources. Some of it can't. Liquefied natural gas, for example, gutter or Qatar, whatever you want to, how you want to say it,
yeah, right.
they produce a massive amount of liquefied natural gas. You just can't up production in Australia and the United States to overcome that. Whereas if you lose oil production out of out of Kuwait, you can go to Nigeria, you can go to Brazil, you can go to other places to go find some of this oil. May not be enough, and you may have to go through some shortages, and there may be some increased prices. But some of this you can't replace. And you have to fertilizer is the big one right now. If we don't get the fertilizer
Yeah.
out, that's going to have an immediate impact in the following year that we can't get fertilizer in the ground.
Yeah. So it starts to compound real fast. I don't blame Iran for protecting an asset and using it to defend themselves. This is,
No.
you hold on and sue for peace and make it hard for everybody. And we see that this is all. This is about how I couch your stuff, Sal. It's all a competition. And yes, you can punch someone in the mouth over here, but back over there they stabbed your buddy in the back, and it's all connected. These fights, these competitions.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that the U.S. did not seem to have a plan in place to deal with the Strait of Hormuz. This has been an issue that's been going on for 40 years. I mean, since 1979, everybody was concerned about the Strait of Hormuz, and there are plans. I mean, there are plans to keep the strait open and everything like that. It just appears that in this case, we're a little bit short on resources there, ships necessary to open up the straits. And now all of a sudden, you need to open it up, and now that creates an issue because now there's not enough escorts. And the harder thing is to get this flow moving. I mean, there is about 20,000 mariners, about 3,000 ships stuck inside the Persian Gulf right now.
Right. Any idea how long it takes to get them unstuck? Is there someone besides the US president who can say, I know what to do?
Well, unfortunately, what we're seeing is Iran's taking care of that. Iran has started letting some ships flow, but what Iran is doing is requiring the ships to come up into Iranian waters, clear through their waters before they let them go. And what we don't know is what Iran is doing to let those ships go. We don't know if they have to pay to get out, if they're just, being cleared by Iran to make sure they're not American or Israeli or British vessels. But what we're seeing is that choke point is turning into a checkpoint, and the Iranians seem to have the gate. They're the gatekeepers now for letting ships in and out, which is exactly what the U.S. didn't want to do, is give them
Right.
more power than they had before. And yet we want them not to have a nuclear weapon, but I don't want them to have a nuclear control over shipping, which seems to be what's materializing here.
Yeah, the I'm putting the link up for Sal's YouTube page. There's other things we can go and push people towards, but this is where you get a lot of the daily updates and you get Sal's expertise. And by the way, again, thanks for coming on the show and answering these questions because we see a lot of insanity in terms of what's going on and how it happens. Let's just wind back for a second. I know that we know that there are plans and they're all in the plans locker, and we've worked these contingencies and we've trained them, and it's been 50 years and all that. But here we are. It seems that we have no plan, right? So how can we have all these PhDs designed towards here's how I mean, gosh, there's just so much thought that has gone into this. How can we be this seemingly behind the ball on this? How did that happen?
Well, I mean, there are plans. I know Fifth Fleet, I know the Navy staffs,
Sure.
and I mean, there's been plans how to do it, but you got a couple of things working here at the same time. Number one, back in June when we launched the strike against Iran, at that time there was no disruption. There was a slight disruption. It was very minor, it really, and
Mhm.
so there could be a perception like, okay, this is not going to cause a problem. We'll just, we'll do this
Mhm.
bombing operation, and we'll be able to do it. Well, you go back to previous wars in the midst of the tanker war, the 1980s, cargo was still flowing. 411 ships hit, 55 of them lost. It never stopped. The Strait of Hormuz never closed. And I think that the U.S. went into this with Israel is under the impression of like, all right, this should work. We should be able to do this. We're going to provide enough. We're going to neutralize, the threat. We're going to hit the ballistic missile sites. We'll hit the cruise missile sites. We'll hit the Navy. I mean, the Navy has made the military has made a big point about, everything that's Iranian and gray has been whacked and knocked out. The problem they have is this: if I'm a military guy and you tell me I have a 99% chance of success at something, I'll take those odds any day of the week. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I'm going to go ahead. That is 100% perfect for me. I'll take that. 1% offset, not a problem. If I'm commercial, I'm a commercial shipping guy. You sit there and tell me there's a 1% chance I'm going to get hit and sunk. They're going to sit there and go, "Ooh, hang on a second. That's not just losing the ship and the crew, but that's losing the next 10, 15 years of revenue. I'm responsible for an environmental disaster." I mean, this risk is different in the military than the commercial side. And I think there was a failure to understand that back in 2023 and 2024 and even 2025, when the U.S. launched strikes against the Houthi in the Red Sea. I sat there and said, listen, the U.S. is winning tactically. We are shooting down drones and missiles left and right. Proficiency in the U.S. military was, top notch. It was great. The problem is you can shoot down 99.9% of every Houthi missile. As long as they still had one left, the shipping companies are going to look at that. And more importantly, their insurance companies are going to look at that and say, that's a bit of a risk. You're going to have to go around. And I think that's the disconnect problem. I think that is really no one told, not the military. I think the military understood this, but no one told the leadership, whether it's the president, the secretary of war, whether it's the joint chiefs of staff, the senior leaders. Listen, this operates differently than the way you think. This is not going to conform, the same way that we think the military acts. And that's the kind of the problem we're seeing.
I love the concept of thinking about policy versus politics. How much of this is politics? Do you have a sense at all for that?
Well, I think President Trump laid out a cause for war, which, I mean, I've had friends who served in the military for the past 20 years, and they've been victims of IEDs by the Iranians. Sure. And I sailed in the Persian Gulf. Iran's not a nice nation. I mean, it's just not. I mean, it's got a horrific track record with its own people and its actions. It's bombed ships. I mean, I can go back and show you lists of ships that have been attacked by the Iranians, and they've got 2 tankers they're still holding since 2022 sitting there. I mean, these are not the nicest people in the world. And the problem I think the administration had is, number one, they didn't bring, I think, the opposition party in with them, the Democrats. There should have been probably a little more discussion with that. Should have brought the allies in a little bit more with it. And I think one of the things you see is it's very difficult to go alone, even though we have the Israelis with us. Largely, the U.S. is carrying a large, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, it's the U.S. side that's really handling that. It's hard to do this without the allies. Every plan for keeping the strait open, for example, depended on the Gulf Cooperation Council. It depended on allies coming in to assist that, because we built a Navy for power projection. We built a Navy so that we can do exactly what we're doing now, launching Tomahawk cruise missiles, catapulting F-18s, and, doing these kind of, persistent strikes against land targets. What we didn't build was a Navy that can do escorting through the Strait of Hormuz and commerce protection. We kind of blew it the past 20 years in our Navy building programs. We never built the small little escort vessel that we need. Tried it with the littoral combat ship, these very fast vessels, but they don't quite manifest themselves the way we want them to. And so what we find ourselves doing is kind of running an operation that's really without the right force structure. And that's one of the reasons I think that President Trump turned to the allies to try to bring the allies in. But the problem with that is when you wage a kind of trade war with your allies with tariffs and everything, which again, the U.S. made an argument for why we need to put tariffs on. Now, all of a sudden, you have a true trade war. In this case, the Iranians choking off trade. Yeah. Now it's hard to get the allies to come up to bear with that. And I think, again, that's an onus that the administration has to have to do a better job in trying to bring everybody on board with this. We're trying to do it through social media tweets. That's not kind of the way we need to do it.
Right now I'm posting some shorts for some recent episodes of the show. And the one I just posted right now is about Venezuela. Remember way back when Venezuela was the thing that wasn't going to work and everybody was losing their minds? Are we going to be sitting here in 3 weeks going, remember when the Strait of Hormuz was a problem and then we just didn't give 2 fucks because whatever the next thing is the thing that we're told to care about?
Well, Venezuela, I would argue, is in terms of, for example, just oil is not as significant as we see right now with what we see in the Persian Gulf. My fear is you've created a lot of disruptions in the global supply chain with this. And
Mm,
that's
mhm.
going to resonate. Even 3 weeks from now, if the strait is even wide, I mean, if it is tomorrow, I mean, Pete, if it's wide open
Yeah.
tomorrow, everything goes. You've created disruptions whenever given went sideways in the Suez. 450 ships piled up on both sides of the canal. It was at least 6 weeks to 3 months before everything
Mm.
got resolved from that disruption. I mean, it's kind of like going down, the 8 lane highway, and it shrinks down to two and then widens back out to eight. It's like, okay, traffic's going to flow, but it's not going to be the same. And the disruption is going to be there for a while. It'll take a while for it to kind of reset.
Yeah, well, I was in Afghanistan and we had a little problem with our contracts to get stuff into the country. And, you always got to go through somewhere else. And we were running out of chew and we were running out of tortilla chips and people were losing their shit.
Oh yeah.
And so it doesn't take
You're
much.
gonna have a
I
mutiny
mean,
there.
especially the chew. Yeah, I mean, it was real challenging, and it's funny, but also it's true. Like and then the contracts got worked out, and everything started moving again. But it causes a real disruption in day to day life, which makes it hard for any leader to be like, "Hey, hang in there, it's solved. We're gonna get a contract worked out." Or like if you have a satellite, and HBO and satellite don't get along when it's contract negotiation time, and all of a sudden your HBO is gone or whatever, people lose their minds. They don't tolerate this kind of disruption, and we tend to remember that. I think it impacts us in ways that it's hard to account for when you're a leader.
Well, I always argue this, Pete, that people take for granted logistics. They really do. They think everything's going to
No,
be on the shelves. They think the fuel is going to be there. I live in North Carolina. We get hurricanes roll through. Power's going to go out at some point or another, but I don't worry
yeah,
about it because number one, I got a generator. I got backups, and within
yeah,
a day or two, power crews are going to come in and rig the lines. What if the power crews don't come? It's like, that's the logistics thing you have to
hmm,
worry about. And it's the people who don't prepare for this. Listen, I've been a volunteer firefighter for 25 years. I understand
right,
emergencies. I understand being prepared, but a lot of people aren't. So that when the power goes off, they're like, "Oh crap, what do I do?" And
right,
that's the moment. And one of the things that we learn in military is you stockpile. You have days of supply. You have don't live by just in time logistics. Well, unfortunately, most of the world lives by just in time logistics, so that when you have disruptions, it's hard to absorb it. Now, I would argue since 2020, when we had the Suez closed and we had other issues happen, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot more. Logistics has gotten a little more resilient. Companies aren't quite as stupid, I would argue, as they were, but some are. Don't get me wrong. Some of them see, they learn a lesson and then they realize, it's too expensive to keep doing this. Let's go back to the way it was. We shouldn't be impacted by this. And now all of a sudden it happens. And again, I think understanding this is very difficult. This is not a sexy topic. Nobody studies logistics. No one wants to talk to loggies because everybody wants to talk to the shooters and the people up front. They don't, you want to be the guy in the back room going, "Hey, there's going to be a problem. Just so you know." It's
uh-huh.
like, oh, you'll
Yeah,
make it work, and that tends to be the military
yes,
solution. We'll work our way through it.
yes, that's 100% true. That's
Oh yeah.
100% true. Like when the loggy guy stands up and he's like, "Listen, everything's okay right now." Boop, everybody stops listening. However, if these things happen, we're kind of in the yellow right now. Nobody cares about the goddamn yellow. Next, it's like no attention. But there are people that get PhDs in logistics. It's a miracle that we can move all this stuff around as just as quickly and as efficiently as we do. We could always improve at the seams, but nobody cares about the seams.
What got me doing what I do was I was a merchant mariner. I was sailing ships for a living, and I was in the port of Ad in Saudi Arabia in 1990, 91. It was 91. It was probably January, February 91. And lay down on the ramps there was the entire equipment for the First and Third Armored Division. The entire Seventh Corps came in from Germany, and I've never seen anything like that. It was like a World War
Yeah.
II movie with
Yes.
as many tanks and trucks laid out there. That was just absolutely incredible. And I asked myself the question, like, how the hell do you do that? It's just amazing. It was just like, holy, you picked up two entire armored divisions from Germany, plopped them into Saudi Arabia in no time. And to me, that was just, it was just amazing. It was just absolutely amazing. And I took that from military logistics over to commercial logistics, and you realize, well, listen, providing what everybody needs for, just, the amount, like the logistics of bananas in the United States is insane because
Oh,
of the
yeah.
speed it takes and the movement that is involved in it. And, you start looking at that and you realize there's always these little fault points. I don't like ever to use the term supply chain is a term I don't like, because a supply chain tells you that if one link breaks, the whole thing breaks. And that's not what happens.
Mm.
Supply is
Mhm.
more like a web. It's got multiple points of attachment, and usually it's good, but there's going to be a point where you cut a strand and that's it. The entire web will collapse. And that's what supply is to me. It's like, it's not the link, it's the web, because you can get by. Well, we can get by without this. Well, we can make do short with this. But when all of this hits at the same time, that's when everything collapses.
Yeah. Man, you said a lot. I want to go back to the littoral and like who's going to handle this work. A lot of this stuff is driven by commands, by senators, by presidents, and then the competition for we need a small sub, we need a bigger sub, we need littoral ships, we need this, we need that, and we can't say yes to everything, right? So there's a lot of competition in and around DC to try to secure this money, and then there's what you want and what you get. And so when we look at these conversations and we look back and we go, God, we probably overhedged on whatever we need. Like apparently we're gonna build battleships, right? Well, that is going to take a piece of the pie out, and that means other stuff won't get made. I don't know if battleships are the right answer or not, but that costs money. All this stuff is important to work on. So should we be looking back? Do we look back and go, you know what, we needed to actually have a better capacity? I think Conrad the other day was talking about the amount of destroyers they have, how much time it takes, how to refuel them, how to provision. And by the way, we reduced the ability to do that remotely, so we have to go, all these things, right? The logistical problem of having destroyers escort stuff, especially when destroyers are now cruisers, destroyers are doing other jobs.
Yeah, I mean, you need to figure out well, I would always argue, number one, what's your mission? What's your mission going to be?
Mhm.
And for the U.S. Navy, it's become power projection. It's been, it's we're not fighting blue on blue navies anymore. It's like, okay, this is, it's the dividend of defeating the Soviets. It's like, congratulations, you just won the Cold War. And now it's like, okay, what's your mission? It's like, oh, I don't know. Our mission had been to destroy the Soviet Union. Now, what's our mission going to be? And then you have the Persian Gulf War immediately after. It's like, okay, now I know what my mission is. It's power projection. It's launching, tomahawks. It's aircraft. It's strategic deterrence with boomers and ballistic missiles. That's what my mission is. And this trade protection thing is not. That's small. Let's. And we also thought the Allies will have that. Well, let the Allies have it. They have small ships. They can do that. They can basically take that mission. And the problem is when all of a sudden you find yourself going alone, you realize you need to have everything. You need a little bit of everything. This is my argument, is that, do you need the 11 aircraft carriers? Yes, I would argue we do. But at the same time, what if I get 10 aircraft carriers, but I get a whole batch of small little frigates? That may be a good little
Yeah,
trade-off. Or
yeah,
maybe I
right.
need to figure out how to use my carriers more effectively, and maybe not always have them forward deployed, but ready to surge from the coast and be able to move things in a different way. And I think one of the problems is it's very hard to change an organization. I mean, it's just, and it doesn't matter if it's a military organization, a commercial organization, the entrenchment, the fear of change is among everybody. Nobody likes to take that change and that challenge. Everybody wants to be evolutionary. No one wants to be revolutionary. And
Yeah.
I think you need to kind of look at this a little bit different. And the problem was success created problems for us. We had these grand, bold ideas of ships we were going to build, the Zumwalt class destroyers, littoral combat ships, and they're going to be futuristic and they're going to do all these great things, and we're not going to have a problem. I mean, literally, we're talking about fighting in the littoral, and we don't have any littoral combat ships there because the littoral combat ships may not be the right ship for this mix. So it's like, we built an entire class of vessels. We just can't quite figure out where they work. And,
Yeah.
and
And
but at the same time, I would argue you got to use them because that's what we have. You got to put them into the mix.
right. And we've talked about this in the show before too, but if you want to start a new class of ship, these littoral ships, not only is there going to be growing pains, which we've seen, but it doesn't take 8 weeks to do this. It takes it takes more than a career to go from cradle to there it is, a floating with a capable staff, or crew on there. These are long thought out things. And by the way, the enemy always has to say, when they see these kind of ships, they're like, here's what we're going to do.
But at the same time, Pete, I would argue that
Yeah.
the troops in the field, the guys in the field and the girls in the field have a say
Yeah.
too, because they're going to sit there and say, listen, this is what I need now. I'm going to rig something up. I'm going to take a Humvee and I'm going to put some metal plates
Oh,
on it. I'm going to work
sure.
this. And guess what? I'm going to come up with something. And man, we're going to develop this
Mhm.
into an MRAP or something like this, because this is what we need. This is the development. I
Yeah.
remember I was actually teaching at West Point in 05, 06. And
Okay.
I remember the cadets up there start, and this is again early on, everything was going on. They had a group chats. They had these kind of, groups where they were talking to guys who just graduated from there, talking about, okay, if you're coming to Afghanistan, things you need to be thinking about, things, they were
Mhm.
passing on lessons learned among themselves at a very low level, because, hey, when you're a brand new butter bar coming out here, you better learn this quick, because there's
Yeah.
not going to be a lot of learning time for you, so that you can deal with your sergeants, your NCOs, and your E4s. Learn this lesson fast. And that to me is the problem. I went to conferences where I saw the Navy slapping themselves on the back for the job they did in the Red Sea, and again, they did a great job. But if your mission was to open up the Red Sea for commercial traffic, you failed the strategic mission. You did great
Mm.
tactically. You shot down a crap load of missiles. You did great operationally. Well, we achieved our goal, which was to dominate the
Mhm.
airspace, but the commercial shipping didn't come back, and that's your strategic objective. And you got to think strategically. And again, not everything is a solution with the military. Every time the military sees something, they use the hammer because that's what they have.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the administration's got to sit there and say, maybe we need something else, economic, political. What do we need to do? Because that's how wars are won. It's not always military. There's other elements that win a war. Usually it's on the home front.
Sure. Sure. I'm going to put an image up here from a lady named Megan Konar. She studies the movement of food, and that's this is PhD level work, and so she's showing us how this food all leaves and goes on into the state. It isn't meant to tell you everything you need to know, but what she did is she looked like, what are the roads? What condition are the roads? What
Yep.
are the locks that have to open and close? How are they protected? Is there a strategic asset there that needs to be, like, whoever protects, like stands there guard, like nobody's going to blow up this lock mechanism today, like that? That's not a thing that happens. I mean, maybe in some places, but if you find the one that's exposed, that entire system starts to decay, and it's finely tuned. It's always being made more efficient. The insurance companies understand the risk, and so there's not an insurance company in the world that wants to pay out on a claim. Like all of
No.
these things work in concert. And so when you kind of throw the rock in the pool in the Strait of Hormuz, everybody has to go, we don't know how to work with this system and make it go forward. And it's hard to ask anybody to stick their neck out for you, because we decided, whether it was good or not, we made a change that makes the system uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, back in 2021, when COVID was hitting, we had the supply chain crisis. We had 109 ships arrive off LA, and I wrote papers and I talked to people in the military. I said, you need to watch this, because this is showing you what happens to a logistics system that gets jammed up. And
Yeah.
this can be used as economic warfare. I got a good friend by the name of Nick Lambert. He's a fantastic historian. He wrote a book on the British Admiralty before World War One, and he said there was an entire section within the British Admiralty that studied economic warfare. They said, listen, shooting is one thing, but before we ever get to it, we could wage this type of warfare, economic warfare, where we use
Mhm.
trade and commerce as a weapon against the enemy. And we don't even have to fire a shot. It's great. It's like but we can use this. We can control trade. We can manipulate it. We can, cause, vital commodities not to get in the hands of our potential adversary. We can make it expensive for them, so that if they do get it, we can
Yeah.
corner the market in this area. And I hate to say it, but countries like China look at that stuff and they digest that and they sit there and understand it. So that in 1990s, when we're sitting there high-fiving everyone for winning the Cold War and thinking it's a brand new world order and there's going to be peace in our time, the Chinese are sitting there going, well, Belt and Road, let's figure out how we, build up an infrastructure so that we never become what happened to the Japanese in World War II. We don't want that to happen. So we got to build ourselves up. And unfortunately, not everybody takes advantage of that. They don't look at that, because again, I always think that the military, you don't become the chief of naval operations being a logistics guy. You don't become the chief of staff of the army being a loggy. You just don't. I mean, you're 11 Bravo. You're a ground pounder. You're an
Yeah.
armor guy. The Air Force chief of staff is going to be a pilot, guaranteed. He's not going to be the guy who makes sure that there's enough, tortilla shells,
Yeah.
tortilla chips, and for everybody. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Even though that's a lot of what the Air Force mission is make sure we have all the stuff that we need. They even call themselves managers instead of necessarily leaders. It's
They do.
so
I
true.
mean, the aerial, one of the big things, going on right now is the destruction of aerial refuelers. I mean, it's not a big story, but we lost a batch of KC-135s. That is absolutely crucial. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
understand why this is not registering more with everybody, because I understand logistics. I'm like the type of guy who's the worst enemy of the U.S. Navy, because I know how to hurt the U.S. Navy in a way that would really
Mm,
undermine it. Because
mhm.
in many ways, I don't go against an aircraft carrier. An aircraft carrier is a layered defense. It's a tough thing to do. What I go against is the ship that refuels it, because that's the
Yeah.
thing that's going to take it out of operation. That's the issue right there. I mean, that's once it runs out of fuel, and I know it's a nuclear aircraft carrier, it doesn't run out of fuel, but the planes do, the escorts do. That becomes the big issue. And that's always the weakness. And that's I'm doing a course right now in the Civil War, where
Mm.
I'm showing my students is like, listen, that it's basically deadlock. It's a deadlock civil war until all of a sudden the Union figures out we're going to just undermine the ability of the Confederates to fight this war anymore. We're going to rip up their
Mhm.
infrastructure. We're going to terrorize their homes. We're going to deal with their logistics, and they're not going to be able to fight anymore. And that's
Yep.
the way you win the war.
And there's Sherman with his hands on his hips, going, "How long have I been saying this to you guys? I need three hundred
Oh,
thousand
Sherman's been
people."
talking about the whole time. But again, it's the nature of war. War evolves
Right.
into different things over time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So who's the Sherman in your guys' world? Is like, I've already been telling you about this. Is it you? Is it John Conrad? Who's the guy that's leading the way in your guys' world?
Well, I mean, John's a great guy. He's been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of smart people who've been talking about it for a long time. I mean, Commander Salamander, who runs a blog, he's been doing this for
Sure.
15, 20 years now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there who say this stuff. Brent Sadler. I mean, I could go on and on with a list of people who say it. The
Yeah.
problem is, a lot of people know it. The problem is trying to get it out of the knowledge base into the popular thing. And one of the reasons I started a
Mm.
YouTube channel was to educate people about shipping. Is because it's an alien world. They don't understand it. And the problem is, if I get you a shipping executive or a captain off a ship and he starts talking to you, you're not going to understand what he's talking about, because unfortunately everybody talks within their own kind of vernacular. It's like trying to talk to someone. I always remember with my West Point students, I always told them when they go back home, no one's going to understand what you're talking about, because you guys talk in a way, with acronym crazy stuff that no one understands. And they're going to look
Yep.
at you like you're an alien. I try to make it understandable, because we also have moved shipping out of the mainstream. It's not in the ports anymore. It's off on these far things. You can't get
Right.
onto a port. And so it becomes kind of alien to everybody. And then when events happen involving shipping, in come the news who have no idea what's going on. They don't
No.
understand it, because they're trying to figure it out. And so they go chasing after who's a good source out there. I don't know who's a good source. And they chase after them, and they find people who I don't know where they find some of them. But it's like, oh, this is not a good person to explain this. They have no idea. It's a boat, so I'll get a Navy
Yeah.
guy to talk about commercial shipping. It's like, no, you
Right.
need a commercial shipping guy. Same like if you got a Navy thing, don't get a captain of a container ship to talk about a destroyer or a submarine. That's not going to work.
Yeah. I know a bunch of Europeans from my hometown up north in California who are all in shipping, and it's amazing hearing these guys talk about everything and it's a totally new language. It's not like I don't mean new like it's brand new, but I mean it's like unknown to you. So like if they start talking about stevedores and all these, you're like, what in the hell is a stevedore? Do
Yeah.
they wear special pants? You have no idea. And these guys know that stuff. One of the guys that I know, his specialty is when something goes wrong, he is the guy that you figure out how to fly him to Tahiti or wherever it is, and he figures out how to get the boat that's on the reef, and he figures out how to get all the things, because he's one of those problem solvers. His entire career is based upon just being, oh fuck, let's call Bob. His name's not Bob,
Yep.
but we'll say it is
Oh,
these days.
I mean, guys like do marine salvage are great. I mean, they're just
Oh yeah,
troubleshooters all the time with it. I'm a historian too, so I study a lot of
yeah.
World War II, and one of my favorite study topics is Guadalcanal. And
Oh sure.
you talked about stevedores. It was a classic issue. They thought they knew everything to do the invasion. Then they get to Guadalcanal and they land the troops, and troops are easy. Troops move. They move themselves. They get off the boat. They get in the boat. They move. What doesn't move is the cargo. It's like, okay, we got a boatload of supplies we got to get off. It's like, oh, we don't have enough friggin' people to do this. It's like, and then when we get the, the cargo into the boat, we got to get it to the beach. Now we got to get it out of the boat up the surf, and then not just on the beach, but inland. And it's like, this logistics stuff is tough. It is like, and it's slow and it doesn't move fast. And I remember being in Saudi Arabia in 1990, and we were offloading a ship, and we had maybe one, container handler to move containers. It's like, everybody's like, why don't we have 5 of these? It's like, we've been talking about that forever. It's like, but no one wanted to buy 4 more because we wanted to buy a truck or a tank or, an armored vehicle.
Yeah, man. It is always these things. And then when the idea is wrong, this is me on the ground. You see the guy, hey, I'm Colonel Pete, and it's all schools this year. We're building schools. And I'm like, hey, there's 30 schools right over there that nobody goes to. Listen, building schools this year. Yeah. Doesn't matter. You're like, oh my God, I'm in a musical, like these guys. But it's what we do all the time. We pick something, whether it works or not, as long as we spend the money. That's really the first priority, is just, can we get money in the bucket, and can we get it out as fast as we can so we can fill the bucket with more money again? It's infuriating. Okay. I grew up in Benicia, which is about a mile away from Cal Poly Maritime. Yeah. It's a dinky little school, but what an amazing school. How are you all doing on recruiting and getting people to think, man, I can do that career? A lot of people, me included, don't really know what a merchant marine even is. Like is that a guy who's moving containers and has a rifle? What, so how are you guys doing at marketing your careers? So, and do we have enough people? Because if you got 1,000 people graduating from Cal Maritime, only so many of those guys are going to take a commission, and only so many of those guys are going to go on ships, and you're going to lose a lot of them, just the real world.
Yeah. So, I mean, the merchant marine, unfortunately for the U.S., is pretty small. I mean, it's 23rd in terms of size in the world. It's nowhere near what it once was. Shipbuilding is down. The number of ships is down. We only have maybe about 190 deep draft vessels left in the merchant marine. So it's tiny when you consider the fact that, the Chinese Overseas Shipping Company, which is the largest shipping company in the world, has 1,600 ships, and that's one company in China. So it gives you an idea of the size of it. In the United States, we have a great pipeline for merchant mariners. We have the Federal Academy at Kings Point. We have 6 state schools. Besides Cal, you have Texas, you have New York, Massachusetts, Maine, and Great Lakes, which is in Michigan. So we're producing merchant mariners at a pretty good volume. Enrollment at the schools are pretty solid. The problem you have is a lot of the schools have adopted this dual track where you can do your merchant marine license, or you don't have to do a merchant marine license. So we're not getting as many merchant mariners, licensed merchant mariners out there, because it's kind of hard to maintain your license, and because you need to sail, and you need the jobs out there, and you need the opportunities. Now, the Trump administration has come out with a bold plan, this Maritime Action Plan, the SHIPS Act, to try to get shipping up and going again. I would say that the plan is good. The bill is good. We just need to get it over the hurdle and pass. We need to get some action on it. We're getting a little bit of mixed messages from the Trump administration on shipping right now because of this issue with the Strait of Hormuz. But it really needs to be kind of clarified. I think one of the advantages the U.S. has is that shipping is undergoing a big change. When shipping undergoes an evolution or a revolution, the United States finds itself usually at the cusp of it. Usually, in the age of sail, the age of steam, these were moments when the U.S. kind of really embraced it. They really kind of grabbed onto that. And I think one of the things that the U.S. can do is be there at the next big change. I think the next big change we see is nuclear propulsion on shipping. Sure. I think that's a big element. And we're not talking about reactors like you have on submarines and aircraft carriers. You don't need that much power, that much, generation. What you need is low order reactors, maybe a 5% reactor, not a 90% reactor. So, molten salt water, so that if something happens and the ship sinks, it actually scrams the reactor automatically. It basically goes inert when it happens. But it's efficient, it's clean. More importantly, you're not paying for fuel. You get, 20 years out of that propulsion system. It's modular, so you slide it out when you're done with it. You take the spent core, you bury it in concrete, so you never have to worry about it again. And then the ship can be scrapped, and you're off and running. And I think it's one of the big future elements for the United States. We built the first commercial nuclear ship back in the 1960s, the nuclear ship Savannah. we need Savannah
Yeah.
too. We need that next evolution. And I think one of the things that you see coming out of the Merchant Marine Academies right now are a lot of young men and women who want to see this. They are. I always joke. I went to one of the schools. I went to New York Maritime, and I joke I
Mhm.
went to a 4-year trade school. It's basically what I
Yeah.
did. I graduated with a college degree. I got my bachelor's in marine transportation, but I also, I could break down an engine. I can pilot a ship. I could do,
Yeah.
it was probably the best education I could ever have. It's a ridiculous education because the amount of credit hours I took was just ridiculous. I mean, it's just insane the amount of classes you take, but it provides you with, I would argue, one of the best educations in the world. And more importantly, it's created me with a network of friends and people who I didn't even go to school with, but are classmates of mine, went to the same alma mater, that we have a network where, I mean, something happens in shipping today, I can find out in a minute. I mean, it's just, it's the greatest little network of people in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's your guys' field. You're right. It is a trade, and it's when I think about like a captain, the idea of a captain and who that person is supposed to be, I think about Robert Bartlett. I read this great book about the Karluk who gets beset by ice up the North Pole area, and he walks basically to Alaska. I'm making this a lot easier than it really was, but this guy just refused to quit and did things that were superhuman. And how is it that you guys make these people? Robert Bartlett's one guy who did one crazy thing, but you guys have some kind. Is it must be a calling? Is that what it is? Like where you get these incredible people that are just built for the sea?
I mean, it was kind of, I hate to say it is a calling, but it was a calling for me. I remember growing up in New York, my dad had a boat. We used to go offshore fishing, and I hate fish. I'm not a fish eater. I don't like fishing. I don't like doing anything, but I love being on the boat. It was me that was driving
Hmm.
the boat. That was my job. And we go
Yeah.
offshore, and I'd see the ships coming in and out of Ambrose Channel, coming into New York City. I was like, oh man, that's what I want to do right there. I want to
Hmm.
go where they're going. I don't know where they're going, but they're going somewhere, and it's got to be pretty awesome to go do it. And you love it. The last captain I sailed with, man, he'd been captain of 24 ships. It was just an
Oh
insane
my
amount
gosh.
of
Yeah.
experience this captain had. And he was just, I mean, he's one of the most impressive people I've ever seen. I mean, just he could command anything, and he had a way about him, and he could just read situations. And I mean, he was such a good all around, just knowledge base that just was impressive. Some of the best teachers I ever had. I mean, I became a teacher, and some of the best teachers I ever had were not in the classroom environment, but
Right.
were mates who were teaching me on a school training ship how to do things. I talk about two guys, Ted Bernhardt and Scotty James, who were mates on the last year I sailed on my training ship. And those two guys probably had the biggest influence in me becoming not just a mariner, but a teacher, an educator, because I thought they were some of the best teachers in the world. I thought they were great.
Right.
And you have those not just in maritime, you have them in all fields, but it's just, it's very unique. It's got to be used to being away, being in a small group of people, being with people you hate and love at the same time, but being able to work with them. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, I had the toughest guy I ever worked with was one of my ABs, one of my able-bodied seamen. And the day I got him to kind of respect me was like the best day in the world. I don't care because
Yes.
they didn't have to pay me at all. It's the day, that Butter Bar second lieutenant gets the respect of the first sergeant. It's like all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's like, okay, this kid's got something to him. He's not that bad. And it's a
Yeah.
moment that I think everybody has at some point. It's like, all right, I figured this out now, or maybe I think
Yeah.
I figured it out now. Now
Yeah.
I'm part of the way there.
Man, proving up, it's a big thing. And the world you guys live in, I don't know your guys' world, but I can imagine it's up to you guys. And if somebody gets hurt, it's like, yeah, I'm hurt. However, someone's got to fight this fire, and there's not enough of us. So I'm gonna, whatever it is, you guys make sacrifices and take on huge challenges. I talk to a lot of solo sailor guys, and I love to ask them the question, was it dangerous? How many times did you almost die? And then they laugh in my face. I'm like, I almost died every night, because of whatever these things were, and the impossible lengths they go to. That's the same world, how I see it for you guys that you guys are in. And so, one, thanks for all the stuff you guys do and all the way you guys try to figure it out. It's an amazing profession.
I mean, I love it's so funny because I joke I'm a teacher now. I teach college, but I'm a volunteer firefighter, and I like using both sides. I don't know if it's both sides of my brain, but I say that.
Mhm.
It's I like the academic side. I like doing that. I like thinking. I like doing that kind of teaching and instructing. At the same time, I love a challenge. When the bell goes off and you go, I always joke, sometimes with teaching, you don't see the end result for many years. I mean, you just don't. You don't know if somebody's successful. You don't know that. I got a call. There's going to be a success one way or the other. The house is going to burn down or it's not going to burn down, or the person's going to die or not die, and the car's going to be on fire or not. There's that kind of achievement goal that you have, and shipping is kind of that too. It's every day's groundhog. You work every day. There's no day off. I mean, it's like you're 30, maybe 20, 30 people on a ship. Everybody has a job. You do the job every day. When I sailed, when you first sail, when I was a third mate, you sailed 8 to 12. I had the 8 o'clock in the morning to noon. I had the 8 o'clock to midnight watch. And then during the day from noon to, about dinner time, I was working overtime. I was doing something. I was always doing something. And that was 7 days a week for as long as you're on the ship. If you're on the ship for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, that's your life. I mean, that's the routine. And you get into that routine, and it builds structure for you. And people come and go, they change. So there's a little bit of that. You go to different ports. Sometimes you run the same port. You run the same run over and over again. It's like running a bus. You just do the same run, and you get into it. But then you get off the ship and you go to another ship and you learn that routine. And it's a big challenge. But one of the things that I had a problem with when I was sailing is I never saw the big picture. I always saw the little picture. I was like, what part am I? What part am I doing? And one of the things I try to instill on everybody is like, listen, do your job well, because you're doing a small part of a bigger picture. And that's so true. And one of the things I love to talk about is how all those little parts come together to create this big part, this big network.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you guys are working, how do you fit into the cabinet structure? Are you guys looking at Secretary of Navy and he's like, he's the guy we have to convince? Are you looking at Secretary of Commerce? How do you guys, like, who is the person you guys tie to?
So, well, you got two different things in the U.S. Merchant Marine. So the biggest employer of the U.S. Merchant Marine is the Navy. Believe it or not, 1 out of 5 ships in the U.S. Navy have a Merchant Marine crew on board, which is really unique. I mean, you wouldn't think, for example, 1 out of 5 Air Force squadrons have, civilian pilots, or 1 out of 5 Army brigades, is contractors.
Yeah.
But the Navy does. And so that portion falls under Department of Defense, Department of War. And it's very strange because you have a civilian captain who actually fits into the kind of the unified command structure, because he commands a ship in the U.S. It's a U.S. naval ship. It's specifically a USNS, a United States naval ship. It's not a USS. But, when I was on one of those USNS ships and we're doing refueling, I would give orders to ships. I would tell ships, we're steering this course. You come alongside at this point. I'm directing them. I'm the center of the formation. I've got aircraft carriers coming alongside. So it's a very unique thing. So within that confine, you're within kind of the military structure, even though you're not in the military. You're kind of, it's almost like being a warrant, but it's not. It's just, it's a whole subset of that. And then on the commercial side, you fall under the Secretary of Transportation, because transportation has what I call the 4 horsemen. It's road, rail, aviation, and maritime.
Sure.
And unfortunately, maritime is the smallest one. It really is. It's kind of the runt of the litter. Aviation has all the bells and whistles. It's the hugest one. It's what everyone pays attention to. Then there's road, because that impacts everybody every day. Rail is kind of small, but then the tiniest is maritime. And that I would argue needs to be fixed. I think I've been advocating this for a long time, that we need maritime to almost be something onto itself. It needs to be the commercial maritime. It needs to be the Coast Guard. It needs to be, what's called NOAA, who does the surveying. There's a whole maritime component that unfortunately is really split up. And so for the commercial merchant marine, it's Secretary of Transportation, but in truth, all the Secretary of Transportation does is regulations and licensing. It's the company you work for. If I sail for Maersk Lines, if I sail for Liberty, if I sail for Crowley, I'm a company guy working for that company, and I probably belong to a maritime union, so I'm a union guy. Right. And so, it's a very weird thing, because there's no one clear kind of person you report to in many ways.
Right. So. And it must be true that Sec Ag must have some kind of impact on what you guys do, because you're moving food and animals.
I always laugh that the person the website that has the best information on the Merchant Marine is the Department of Agriculture. They are the best, because they're looking at the movement of grain. That's what they're looking
Yeah.
at. So they have the best information on bulk carriers out there, on trade. Their weekly report on ag is great because it has
Yeah.
barge transportation, has road, rail, has offshore. It is phenomenal because the customer is the one that generates it better than I used to joke
Yeah.
with the Maritime Administration guys like it. It's like, I go to agriculture for information on ships. I'm going to you guys. You guys are terrible.
Yeah.
Agriculture does a great job. And it is. I mean, they have it. It's funny, you know, in 2022, we passed the very first piece of maritime legislation in decades. And it was co-sponsored by Congressman Garamendi, who's a Democrat in California.
Yep.
I think kind of close by where you are at somewhere. John Garamendi. He's in the Bay Area somewhere.
Yeah, right.
And then the other guy who did it is a Republican, Dusty Johnson of South Dakota. And I got a chance to meet Congressman Johnson. And I asked him, I said, why are you sponsoring the Ocean Shipping Reform Act? It's like, you're about as far away from the ocean as I could think of in South Dakota. He goes, Sal, I got farmers. He goes, my farmers needed to get grain to market. And during the global supply chain crisis, we got screwed by the shipping companies. They wanted to ship out empty containers and not containers full of grain. They prioritized that. That can't happen again, because they wanted to get the empty containers back to Asia, load it with crap, and then ship it back, because on that way back, they got more money. If they had grain in the containers, they would have to ship the grain to somewhere. It would have to be cleaned. It would take days, extra days that they didn't want. They wanted to cycle everything as fast as they could. So yeah, agriculture, it's the one place that is probably the most. Commerce also is really key in that too. You see commerce in there. Army Corps of Engineers, who does the dredging and the harbor maintenance and the locks on the Mississippi River, in the Great Lakes. You know, you talk about infrastructure. The Sioux Lock between Superior and Huron and Michigan, probably one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure in the entire country. You lose that lock, you know, you can't bring iron ore out of Duluth. And, you know, one ore carrier can build, I think the number is like 40,000 cars with the amount of ore in one ship. And it's like, all of a sudden, you know, you destroy the car industry in the United States.
It's like looking at a video game when you go to Duluth and you drive up the coast and everything, and you see all that stuff and everything's red, and you're like, here comes the ship. It gets filled with rocks. That ship now has to, and it's like all these things you have to have in concert to get that ship to where it needs to be. And by the way, here comes the next ship. And all these young guys who were young guys then worked those ships, and they're like, and then I went on to become a doctor. The time on the ship, though, was my favorite time. It's an amazing.
There's so many guys like that who worked. I mean, if you, I mean, go back in the 50s and 60s, you hear so many guys started their career in sailing. They worked a job that, you know, was a job they can get out of school. They earned some money. They got some experience, and you know, it was such an important element. You know, and it's funny. I'm a 4-year college professor, and I tell my students every day, I can get you a job right now. It doesn't require a 4-year degree to make you a lot of money. It's like you know, or better yet, I can get you a job right out of school that maybe has nothing to do with your degree, but you can work it a few years, make a ton of money, and then you can pay everything off, and you're fresh to start. And you know, that's what shipping was to me. I think the biggest paycheck I ever had for a long time was my shipping job. When I got out of school and I got my first third mate check, it was fantastic. I didn't make that much money for a long time afterwards. When I came ashore, it was a long time afterwards. So I got even close to that. So because it's a great opportunity.
It is a great opportunity. And then, by the way, if you don't want to go to sea, you can go work good stuff. Look, you want to get a job right now, same thing, great money. Go to the Port of Long Beach. They can't hire enough guys there. You know, like,
and that's the other thing too, is there's so many jobs within the maritime dimension that people don't realize. I was down in Jacksonville, Florida. So a good classmate of mine works as a docking pilot, works for a tug company, McAllister Towing. It's great job. I mean, you're on the tugboat for a couple of days on call, and then you're off. So you're working, you know, a couple of days on, a couple of days off. You're not out in the tug every day, you know, or every minute. You know, you're on call. You know that, you know, you get a schedule ahead of time, so you know to get to the boat. You know, get on board. He works as a docking pilot. He's the guy who climbs up on the ship. He assists the, you know, maneuvering the vessel on and off. Went out with the river pilots. They're the ones who bring the ships up and down the rivers. I mean, there's so many job opportunities out there, and then there's businesses and corporations. You know, I get students by me in North Carolina that I'm able to get them directed down to the Port of North Carolina in Wilmington or Morehead City. Lots of opportunities down there. And a lot of these ports have internships where they try to bring people in. Hey, here's a career path for you. And I always argue, once you get into supply chain, there's going to be a job that you will love in that supply. You may not get the job you love first, but you'll find out about it. And then you'll go after it and you can do it. And you can, if you love solving a problem, there's nothing like supply chain.
Yeah. And you went on to get more degrees too. You didn't just stop at the 4-year degree with the trade school add-on. You kept going, right?
No, I'm an idiot. I went to school further. I got a master's and I went and got a PhD just because I just was a glutton for punishment. And I did that. So Conrad's a captain. I'm a doctor. So that's my thing about Conrad. I always tell him,
that's right.
Like, I'm a captain. He's like, I'm a doctor, dude.
Get at the position of attention, Captain. I'm a doctor. I love it. Yeah, but the thing is in these fields, yes, you can have a degree in playing violin, and God bless, that's wonderful, right? And there's some application to that. But in the military and the merchant marines, I imagine too, it's not only the experience, but you go get the degree that suits what you do, so you're better at what your job is. And if you go into a brigade staff room or a division staff room or a fleet staff room, if you show up with one degree, you're about 10 years behind. I mean, it's the bar is high. And I don't know how all the merchant marine area is, but there's someone who's an expert in whatever the thing is in that organization, and they'll blow your mind with the things that they know and how they studied it and everything. So yeah, it's an amazing organization, all this stuff, moving things around the world. To have a PhD in moving things around the world is something special.
Well, the other thing I love about the Merchant Marine is it's a meritocracy. It really is, because you advance by years in service and then taking a test. And so you start off as you can start off as the lowliest ordinary seaman with no experience. You go to one of the union schools, you get your lifeboatman certificate, you do some training, get on your first ship, and you work for a year at sea. You get 365 days at sea. Go take your AB test. And now you're an able-bodied seaman, and then you get 3 years of sea time as an able-bodied seaman. You become a third mate, and you can become captain. There are three right now masters over at Military Sea Lift Command that started off as ordinary seamen, and it's like that's gets private to colonel. That's what that progression is right there. That's seaman to captain in the Navy, and it's really impressive. It's amazing, and again, I think that's a unique aspect about it. It's very much a meritocracy. Unfortunately, one of the problems we have in the industry is that people stay sailing so long that by the time they get out, it's hard for them to integrate ashore. It's hard to get a captain who's been at sea for 20, 30 years. Now all of a sudden get him into a boardroom or get him in front of a group of people and try to have a conversation with them. It's like, I always joke, one of my hardest things to do was to transition from sailing into the classroom without, yelling and screaming all the time, because, you just did that. That was the way you communicated. And it's a lot that, like, same with the military. It's like, how do you, demilitary? How do you deep boot somebody in to come in so that they're not, using the same language and skills, but it's good to have it in the, I always say, I got that tucked away. I can always bring it out. The mate in me comes out every now and then when I get mad with something.
My favorite way to illustrate that is in the civilian world. If you're like, hey, can you get to that ASAP? And you're like, yeah, I'll get on that for you. You say that to a captain or to, anybody, and you're like, hey, get it for me ASAP. Why the fuck are you still standing here? You're like, I'm sorry, I'm going faster. ASAP means two totally different things between the civilian world.
I always argued that the communication skills. If I'm on the foredeck of a ship and we're tying up, and you're standing in the bight of a line, and I need you to move because you're going to get hurt, I'm not going to sit there and explain it to you. I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, just so you know, your foot's in the bight of the line. If that line moves, you may get hurt. I'm going to tell you to move your effing leg. Just because it's time. It's critical. I need you to know I'm serious and move. I don't have time to explain it to you. I can explain it to you later. That's always the thing. It's like later on, okay, let me explain what happened, why I yelled at you. This is it. And it's a different, and again, one of the things I found is, like, if you get yelled at, you got to be able to get yelled at and know, like, don't take it personally. It's like, okay, why'd you yell at me? Don't tell me now. Just figure it out later. And I had a mate do that with me one time because he yelled at me. It's like, and I got really angry. He's like, don't get angry. I just need you to do it right now. I'll explain later. And it's like, just make sure you always do that, because or else they think you're just a tool. So, just make sure you explain it.
Yeah. Well, and there's a thing also, and it must be true on the ships as well, but if the person is coming down the hallway, it doesn't matter who it is, and they say, make a hole, you just get the fuck out of the way, and you just boom to the wall, because it could be life and death. It could, you don't just get the fuck out of the way, and then get back to doing what you were doing. But that's
we always had the joke on ships that
Yeah.
if you saw the chief mate is always known as the mate, and he's the
Yeah.
senior kind of deck officer next to the captain.
Right.
So the mate, and our rule was, you ever see the mate run after him, don't ask, just go.
Yes,
He's either running to something to go fix it, or he's running away from something. It's always a good idea when you see him running, just take off after him. It's always a good rule.
I was going to say the exact story, a slightly different version of it. You're walking with the boss out in Iraq, and you got these two E4s running. These are privates, everybody, basically. And the boss is like, hey, why are you running? And they're like, we're just trying to get, whatever. He's like, don't run, because then I have to figure out why you're running. Yeah. What are you running from? Or what are you running to, kind of thing. All right, well, listen, I've had you for an hour. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate you talking about all this stuff. If there's anything you want to close with as far as like the Strait of Hormuz, and maybe give us some insight, great. If not, we can wrap it up here. But again, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for watching. Make sure you guys go check out Sal's stuff. Let me put his YouTube channel on here, or just go to, you guys know how to find people. You know what to do. All right. So Sal, go ahead. Floor is yours.
No, Pete, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. There's a lot going on with shipping, and I appreciate it. I've been doing the channel now for 5 years. It's gotten crazy how much it gets followed, and I appreciate I get invited on shows like yours, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you all very much. I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Everybody else, I'll see you all tomorrow.